All right, good evening, everybody. It is 6 o'clock, so we're going to get started here. Thanks so much for registering for tonight. See a lot of the same names from last week's rules webinar. So excited that people are engaged and ready to jump into handicaps. A little bit different topic this week. For those of you that may have missed the rules webinar we did last week, it was recorded and it is available on the club website. It is under the golf drop-down menu. You can find it under Congressional Academy Live, and it's about an hour and 5 minutes, and you could skip around, but that is all on there. It's the homepage is on our YouTube page. A couple reminders for tonight. Please use the question and answer function or raise your hand for any questions. If you raise your hand, the way it works is I can unmute your mic and you can just audibly ask the question. Happy to answer that. Love to answer as many questions as come up, so feel free to ask those as we go along here. We do not have any quiz questions for those of you that were on the rules topic last week. So sorry for those of you trivia buffs. No trivia questions this week, but they will be back. We have 2 more remaining webinars. The rules webinar will be on February 17th, and then we're going to do another handicap webinar on the 24th. Those are going to be different discussion points from the 2 previous webinars. So if you've already tuned into last week's rules one, you won't be seeing repeat information if you get on the 17th, and same for the handicap one. If you're having technical support issues, please email Chris Nieto. That is his email address there, nieto@ccclub.org. Chris is standing by if anyone's having any issues. And this session is also being recorded and will be available after for review on the club website. It usually takes a day or 2 to get it up there. And if there's something, a topic that we go over that you want to get a refresher on, or if you want to send it to somebody that may have missed it, please feel free to do that. So we're going to get into the first thing I want to talk about is what I describe as peeling back the handicap onion. And I just want to create a little bit of clarity with all these different associations and things we have going on in the handicap world. What is it exactly? Because we did a whole handicap webinar, or not, we were in person last year. We did a whole series on the world handicap system, which was a big change last year. And now everyone's getting emails about how the Maryland State Golf Association is switching from GolfNet to GIN, and that goes into effect February 1st. And I know some people are confused. Wait, didn't we just switch over to a new system last year with the World Handicap System, and now we're going to GIN? Why are we changing? So just wanted to break it down. The World Handicap System, this is going to be our top layer of the onion, that was put in place last year, and it is a universal method of and rules for calculating handicaps. So I've got a little map here. There used to be 6 associations around the world that would calculate handicaps. They had their own rules, own set of handbooks. There was a lot of similarities, but there was also a lot of differences. The way courses were, like in terms of slope and rating, was different. So if you go to the UK, that course difficulty level was not measured the same that it was in the States, and not the same it was in Australia. So the World Handicap System is the overarching set of rules and principles for how golf handicaps are established. And that's now universal wherever golf is played in the world. Based on this map, in these 6 different associations, they now all make up the World Handicap System. Allows golfers to compete with anyone. It's a single measure, helps represent your golf ability, whether you're playing here in the States, whether you're playing overseas. And that is what the World Handicap System is. That is still in place. That has not gone away. There were a lot of changes, and I'm going to talk about some of the changes tonight, not necessarily as changes, but just as handicap concepts. But think about the World Handicap System as just the overarching system at which handicaps are calculated. Now, I get to GolfNet and GIN. So you've seen the emails from Maryland State. Maryland State previously used GolfNet as its database system. So GolfNet and GIN are simply handicap databases. They're large collections from different golf associations. And it's a way to be able to look up other people's handicaps. It's a place for you to have your own handicap information stored. So Maryland State switching from GolfNet to GIN is switching from one database, GolfNet, to another database. Both GolfNet and GIN use the World Handicap System. So the way your handicap's being calculated isn't changing. It's just, and we're going to get into the way you're going to post your scores moving forward and things like that. But that's the next layer. Okay, so you've got your World Handicap System, then you've got your database. And then within that database, there's going to be a lot of different golf associations. In Maryland, we just have one state golf association. The state of New York has 3 different golf associations. So just depending on where you are, that golf association has a relationship with a database. So now, as of Monday, February 1st, it's going to be GIN. And then within your golf association, sorry if this is getting a little complicated, you've got all your clubs. So we are Congressional Country Club. We are a member of the Maryland State Golf Association. So when you get a handicap through the club in the golf shop, who's ever helping you out, goes through our Maryland State portal and adds you to our handicap roster. And every year we get an invoice from Maryland State for all the people that have handicaps with us, all the members. And Maryland State, as an entity, stores all of its data, all of its handicaps from all of the clubs in Maryland in the GIN system. And it is all those handicaps are calculated using the World Handicap System. Hopefully that makes sense. I think that just from the questions we get, it seems like there's a lot of confusion with some of this stuff. So you may be on this call where you've called the golf shop in years past and said, hey, I'm going to play in a member guest tournament in Pennsylvania, and the host club is asking for my GIN number. What's my GIN number? And the person in the golf shop would say, well, you don't have a GIN number because Maryland State doesn't use GIN. We use GolfNet, and I can give you your updated index. The other club can look it up on the Maryland State website, but we're not in the GIN system. And that creates some confusion. So hopefully the way I've broken it down there in these different levels makes some sense. And we'll get into some more handicap details. Another area of confusion is index versus course handicap versus playing handicap. I'll talk about index first. Course handicap and playing handicap are very similar concepts. Usually they are the same. It just depends on what type of, if you're playing in a tournament, what the format is. But when you initially look up your handicap profile, there's going to be a number that's a decimal number, whether it's 14.1 or 1.1. That's your handicap index. That allows you to travel, to take your index and translate that into a course handicap at any course. Had a first question of the night pop up. If I already have a GIN number by having a handicap at another club, will I get another number through Congressional? Great question. It's going to be a very popular question over the next few months and probably the entirety of the year. What we can do is we can actually merge your new GIN handicap with Congressional with your GIN handicap at another club. So when you post under your profile, basically you're going to post, if you play around there, or if you play around here, it's all going into the same place. So you won't have to post it twice, which is another great thing for folks that have been members at multiple clubs and have to post in GolfNet and GIN. You no longer have to do that. So that's a big, just a convenience factor with the fact that Maryland State's going to GIN. Great question there. So getting back to the handicap index, I've got my index. I'm 14.5. Now I need to figure out, depending on what golf course I'm playing, what my course handicap is going to be. That's where the next step here is going to be our course rating system. So you've seen this on the scorecard. You've got a slope and a rating for each course. I mentioned previous to the World Handicap system, not every country or one of those 6 handicap organizations define the difficulty of golf courses in the same way. So you couldn't take your index and necessarily go overseas to play golf and be able to calculate it into a usable course handicap. Now you can. They're all calculated the same way. And it allows you to make your handicap portable. So you don't just have a congressional handicap. You're able to take your index and go to any golf course and play from whichever tees, and using the formula that's at the bottom, which the new GIN app will be able to do that for you automatically. You won't have to do all that math, but it allows you to translate your your handicap index into a course handicap. The playing handicap, again, like I said, it's very similar to the course handicap. It just depends on what type of format you're playing. An example I'll give is if we have a tournament where it's 2 partners and they're playing better ball, so they take the best, stroke play, they take the best score on each hole, depending on which partner makes it. The USGA recommends not giving everybody their full handicap, but giving them, I believe for 2-person, it's 90% of their handicap. So your playing handicap would be your course handicap minus that 10% based on the format that you're playing. Again, not super common depending on what format you're playing, but just know that there are basically 3 forms. There's your index. Your index is calculated into a course handicap based on what tees you're playing and taking the slope and the rating of those tees on that particular golf course. And then if you're playing a format that gives you a lesser percentage of your handicap than 100%, that is your playing handicap for that day. I have a few other questions here. If you already have a GIN from another state, do you still need to establish one at Congressional? You don't necessarily have to carry a handicap at Congressional. We do have a few events that do require you to have a Congressional handicap. The President's Cup is one of them. But if you mostly play at another club and you just want to have one handicap profile, you don't need to then also have one at Congressional. That is your discretion. If you do want to have both, again, like I mentioned on the previous question, you would be able to merge the two, and we can do that for you once you get your profile set up. All right, another question here. Lots of times people I play with want to use index to calculate strokes given versus course handicap. Is there anything wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. It's just not really the proper way to measure everybody's ability. And getting a little bit more into detail with that, the lower your index is, the closer your index will be to your course handicap. So if you're a 1.5 handicap, depending on the difficulty of that course, your course handicap's probably going to be either 2 or 3 if it's a really tough course. But if you're a 16 index, your course handicap could be 20. So the person with the higher handicap, if you're playing just based on index, is actually getting penalized more because they're not getting that advantage versus the person with the lower index because their course handicap and their index are going to be more similar. Hopefully that makes some sense. If I enter a score onto the Congressional computer, will it upload to the GIN system? It will, moving forward, once we get switched over as of February 1st. So that, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about posting scores in GIN at the tail end of the presentation. Everyone should be getting their GIN information from the Maryland State Golf Association tomorrow, actually. So this is pretty timing. Another question, merge means you'll have one GIN moving forward, correct? Yes. So if you have a GIN account at another club and you get your Maryland State Congressional GIN set up, Maryland State will tell them to merge the two accounts and you would just have one GIN number. And another person that has experience with the GIN app says that it's great and allows you to add your friends and easily calculate strokes given off the lowest player. So, and I have done a little bit of research on the app, but it does look like the capabilities of it are a lot better than what the old app was that we were using, the Golf Life app. So I'm excited, really excited that we're making that switch. Love all the questions. This is great. Okay, establishing a handicap index. Just to quickly go over this, requires 54 holes posted. It can be any combination of 9 and 18 hole scores. That was a change. It used to be you needed 5 18-hole scores to create an index. So if you have a new handicap profile, you haven't posted any scores, you're going to see NH, which stands for no handicap, and it'll say NH until you have those 54 holes posted. And then once you do have a working handicap or an index, your index will update every night after you post a score. It updates at midnight local time for the association that you're in. So if you belong to a club in California, it's going to be 12 a.m. Pacific time that it updates versus here in Maryland, obviously we're in Eastern time. Your index is calculated based on your eight best of your last 20 scores posted. And so if you're playing really well recently, those 8 scores will weigh for, it'll take 20 scores to get those out of being reflected towards your handicap, because your better scores are going to basically help calculate your index for a longer period of time. Whereas if you have one really bad day, if it's worse than your best 8, it's not going to factor into that calculation of your index. And the maximum handicap index is 54. That's a change under the World Handicap System. It used to be, I believe it was 36.0 for men and 44 for ladies, or 44 or 42, which really doesn't make any sense. So they decided to just make it 54 for everybody. Allows people to establish a handicap a little bit sooner, especially if they're newer to the game. The next section of this presentation is things that you should know during the round, and then we're going to talk about things you should know after the round and what to do. During the round, know where you get your strokes. This is less important for casual golf and more important for if you're playing a match against somebody. And I'll get a little bit more into those details, but you want to compare your playing handicap to the stroke index row on the scorecard. So we've got our example scorecard here for player A. They are a 10 handicap, and obviously there's 18 holes in a round of golf. So there's 10 holes that they're going to receive a stroke on and 8 that they are not. How do we figure out what holes they're going to get those on? Well, you'll see on our scorecards here at the club and most golf scorecards, there's going to be, it'll either say stroke index or handicap, and it essentially ranks the holes 1 through 18 in terms of their difficulty. It's not truly difficulty. It's based on the score difference between low handicap players and high handicap players. So the number 1 handicap hole might not necessarily be the most difficult, but it might have some obstacles on it that are more penal for a higher handicap player, and that's why it ends up getting ranked that way. But if we go through this card and see, we have dots on holes 1 through 10 based on their stroke index, not based on, you wouldn't just receive handicaps on the first 10 or strokes on the first 10 holes. So important to know that, know how this is broken down if you're playing in a stroke play match. And this is also going to be important. We're going to talk about a couple other topics or concepts with handicaps where it's important to be able to identify how many strokes you would get on a specific hole. Let's see here. Got another question here. As a 10 index under the MSGA app, I believe I couldn't enter a score of more than double bogey. Does that stay the same under the GIN system? If not, what are the guidelines? Great question. That is a great example of those rules are actually World Handicap System rules. And I'm going to talk about that concept in a second. For those of you that aren't quite sure what this question is referring to, there's a limitation based on your handicap on basically your maximum score that you could take on a hole. So I'm going to put a pin in that question for a second, and we'll get into it as we skip ahead here. Perfect segue. So the concept I was just describing is maximum score for handicap purposes. Why this exists is so that it keeps a really bad hole, uncharacteristically bad for you, from artificially inflating your score and in turn potentially artificially inflating your handicap. So the score that you would post, let's say we're going to go back to that previous example. I'm a 10 handicap and I've made a 10 on a par 4. Did not have a good round. I hit a couple balls out of bounds. I hit a ball in the water. Wasn't my best performance. The World Handicap System rules are not going to allow me to post a 10 for that score because that is more than net double bogey. Net double bogey is going to be my maximum for any hole. I'm going to go to the next slide here. It's going to break it down. When I did this presentation last year, just created the concept of net double bogey seems to create some confusion. So I'm going to go slowly here. Again, I just use I've got a new example here. So a player with a course handicap of 11 receives 1 stroke on the first 11 allocated stroke holes. On a par 4 hole with a stroke index of 6, the player's net double bogey is calculated as follows. So it's a par 4. Let's say he made a 10 for this example. The World Handicap System rules do not allow him to put that score in. So this is how we figure out what score he can post. So it's a par 4. Double bogey is 2 strokes over par. And then the net component means we're going to add any additional handicap strokes that player would have received on that hole. Okay, so I've got my par, I've got my automatic 2 strokes, like double bogey, and then I'm going to add my handicap strokes on top of that. So let's go back to our stroke index example. So this person made their bad score on the 6th stroke index hole. That is the 12th hole in this example. I believe in that breakdown, it was an 11 handicap, but it works for this table as well for the 10 handicap. So they get their stroke on the par 4 12th hole. It is the 6th stroke hole. So they are going to receive 1 stroke because they're an 11 handicap. So they're going to receive a stroke on each of the stroke index holes up until the 11th stroke index hole, which in this example is the 5th hole. I'm going to take par. I'm going to add double bogey. So par 4, add 2 strokes. That gets me to 6. And then I've got that red dot there indicating that I receive a stroke on that hole. So I'm going to add that. So it takes me to 7. Hopefully that makes sense. I've got another couple other questions here. So I figured this is a topic that we'd have to dig into a little bit. So that first question, as a 10 index, your maximum stroke allowed is going to be the same in GIN as it is in GolfNet. Let's see. The next question is, how come sooner holes get 2 to 3 strokes, but a par 3 gets none? I think that question relates to, let me just pull up that. Got it. Okay. So I think what you're asking is how come the second hole, if the par 3, doesn't get a stroke, but some of these other holes do? And that, if we look at the stroke index for this example, the par 3 is the 17th stroke index hole. So this person would have to be at least a 17 course handicap to receive a stroke on that hole. Typically, the par 3s on most courses are some of the higher stroke index holes. Just because par 3s higher handicap players tend to have a lower stroke average on par 3s than par 4s and 5s. Just seems to be the way. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's why in this example, we skip over the second hole, because it doesn't have to do with the fact that it's a par 3, but it has to do with the fact that it's the 17th stroke index hole. Hopefully that answers that question. How would you compute net double bogey when you're playing off the low handicap in the group? So the low handicap in the group refers to if there's a match with 4 players, instead of everyone taking their full handicap, which doesn't really make sense, they're going to play off the low person. So let's break it down for an easy example. The low person in the group is a 2, and everyone else, the other 3 players, are 10 handicaps. So playing off the low in this scenario, the person who is a 2 becomes a 0, and the person who is the 3 players that are 10 are going to be 8 handicaps for that for the purpose. That only has to do with the match that's being played between those 4 players. In terms of this concept of the maximum strokes taken, you're going to go off of your full course handicap. And what I would suggest is, just when you post your score at the end of the round, to use the hole by hole option. You just put in all your hole by hole scores, and it will just calculate this for you automatically, and you don't have to worry about it. But you always will use your full course handicap when determining the maximum score allowed. Got a couple other questions here. Next question is, just to make sure these blow-up holes do not get counted, do you or the individual player have to enter each hole into the system after the round? Great question. Definitely the preferred method of entering your scores at the end of the round is using hole by hole. It takes away you trying to have to calculate, okay, I had 3 bad holes, let's see if those were higher than net double bogey. So if you just do the hole by hole scores at the end of the round, it takes all the guesswork out of it, and that the GIN app will do that for you automatically. If we enter hole by hole scores in GIN, should you enter the gross score for each hole or net par +2? You would enter, a great question. I see what you're saying there. You just enter what score you got on that hole, and then the GIN app will adjust it automatically for you if it's too high. So always, when you're posting, always put your gross score in there. Next question is, will the gold course be rated for each hole in 2021? The current rating, 11 more difficult than 12 is suspect. Got it. Okay, so we're doing what we call handicap studies. What that means is that we just take a large amount of scores that get posted throughout the year and compare the data. I'd be interested, working in conjunction with Maryland State, if what the last time our holes on the gold were looked at in terms of their handicap allocation. That's a great question. I'll I'll find that answer out, figure out what the last time that was looked at. I know the card or the course was re-rated for the silver tees within the last few years because the yardage on hole 3 on the gold moved up. I think it was 171 and it moved up to 142. But that just affected the slope and rating. I don't know that it affected the hole by hole as much. So I will find that answer out for you. That is a good one. Let's move along here. Similar concept. If you don't finish the hole, if you don't hole out on a hole prior to reaching your net double bogey limit. So if you haven't blown up, but let's just say you've played and you just don't finish for whatever reason. Let's say your partner is already in with a better score and you just don't want to hold the group up. You just pick your ball up. You're going to use your most likely score. And this graphic here just gives you a rule of thumb on how to figure out what your most likely score is. So in the top right, if we're within 5 feet, just add an additional stroke, add 2 or 3 additional strokes, depending on the position of the ball, the difficulty of the green, and the ability of the player. So the example in the bottom left, depending on where that ball is, and someone that's a 35 handicap, if they're 20 feet away, they've got a 50% chance of 3-putting, most likely. So it would be more accurate for them to write down 3 than for someone that's a low handicap who has a good chance of 2-putting from that spot. So it's very much dependent on where the ball is and the ability of the player. And then the bottom right is add 3 or 4 additional strokes depending on the position of the ball. It's possible if you're adding 3 or 4 strokes to your score, it's possible you're going to hit that net double bogey limit anyway. And so I wouldn't worry too much about it if you're that far away. You most likely write your max down. But if you're on the green and you don't putt out, or you're near the green and you don't chip and putt, use your most likely score. Just give yourself a best guess estimate for how many strokes it would have taken you to get down from that position. A couple more questions. When will the blue course be rated after it opens? The Maryland State will come out, I believe it's either going to be in late March or early April, and do the slope and rating. Personally, I've never been a part of a new golf course opening before. So in terms of the stroke allocation, that's a great question. I'm going to have to circle back with you on that one. I think that we're probably going to have to just go with our best guess initially. And then as we get more data, we'll be able to update that. But I don't know. I think that's probably what we'll do. But I'll circle back with you if that is different. Next question. When a hole is reconfigured differently than it was rated, such as hole 1, is it okay to disregard that hole's handicap and treat it as a higher handicap hole and bump every other hole down? Okay, so the example he's asking about, because the tees on 1 have been so far forward since we've really started construction on that tee complex. And what do you do in that scenario? Instead of, that's a good question. I don't know the exact answer. What I would tell you is, in terms of posting your score or trying to figure out net double bogey for your match, I would, and again, this is based on your group and your match and how you guys want to figure it out on that day. The example that I'll give is from it was either last year or 2 years ago. We had that huge storm and the 12th hole on the Gold Course was closed for, I think, almost a week. And we used the short hole instead. And we don't have an official slope and rating for that golf course, the course where 12 is not in effect and the short hole is. And what we did was we told people, when you're filling out the scorecard for your posting, basically pretend like you didn't play the 12th hole, and I'll get into what you do if you don't play a hole. But you would post net par for the 12th hole in that case. So I'll circle back on if a hole's changed for a long period of time, really what is the proper procedure. It's funny, we haven't had any events this year, so I haven't really had to think through that scenario, but that's a great question. I'm gonna leave the ones on here that I need to follow up with people on. So this is the concept I was just talking about, a hole not played. So if you didn't play a hole or multiple holes due to darkness, construction, weather, etc., record a score of net par. So we've talked about how to figure out what net double bogey is. So net par is just par plus applicable handicap strokes. So get rid of the adding in the additional 2. We're just adding that, whatever the handicap stroke is. So if you go back to the example that we were talking about for the max score, in that case, it was a par 4, and there was 1 handicap stroke that would have been applicable. So the score that you would write down would be 5. If you've completed between 7 and 13 holes, you should post a 9-hole score. So if you played 7 holes, to figure out what you should write down for 8 and 9, figure out would you have gotten a stroke or handicap strokes on those holes, and just add those strokes to the par for that hole and write that down for your score. If you played 9 or more holes, you would just disregard holes 10 through 13 that you had played, and just post the 9-hole total. If you complete 14 or more holes, you would post that as an 18-hole score, and you would determine what net par was for you for the remaining 4 holes or 3 holes, however many it was. Just want to make sure I've answered all these questions here. I don't think I've missed any. Someone asked, will they rate the way back tees? Yes. Yeah, the whole thing will be rated. I'm curious what the final number will be for the championship tees. This is just that breakdown of the stroke allocation. So if this person played, let's say they played 16 holes. So for hole 17, they would write down a 5 because it's par's 4, and they receive a stroke on that hole. And then on 18, they do not receive a stroke, so they would write down 4 for that one to figure out what their total 18-hole score should be to post. Okay, we moved into the after the round category or segment. So the first thing you should do is post your score. Post it as soon as possible after your round. For a few different reasons. I think reason number 1 is that you're most likely to remember. And so you if you walk off the course, you pull out the app after you've taken care of your clubs or whatever you need to do after the round before you go into the locker room, and just post your score right there. It takes maybe 90 seconds, and then you don't have to think about it. Really important to ensure all the information is accurate. The app allows you to update the date, the course, what tees you played. I haven't used the Gin app before. I'm going to assume that it allows you to set a default for yourself. But in the case of Congressional, you might play 2 different sets of tees. You play the white tees with one set of friends, and you play the gold tees with another set of friends on the gold course. So setting a default doesn't necessarily, sometimes it can make it more difficult because it makes it more likely for you to make a mistake if you do switch up your normal tees or course that you play. We definitely recommend using the app. Talked about the app several times. Again, the app is very simple to use. It saves you the trip. Well, this year with COVID, we didn't even have the terminal set up in the golf shop. So the app is something that a lot more people have used this year because of that, and it does make the process a lot easier. Talked about it a couple of times, but if time allows, if you have the time to type in those 18 scores, especially if you had a rocky couple holes and you're not exactly confident in calculating your net double bogey, if you just put in your gross scores hole by hole, it's going to take care of that for you. And the accuracy of this information, whether it's making sure the score is correct, making sure the date is correct, making sure the course you played is correct, it affects a couple different things. It affects just how your handicap is calculated, your index integrity. It affects the calculation of what is the playing conditions calculation. I'm going to put a pin in that because I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. But it also affects your peer review or association review. So I'll give an example. We do audits of handicaps for some of the larger events here. If you're not posting things with the correct date, or you're not posting frequently enough, it's possible that your handicap could get audited, and the tournament committee could determine, because it doesn't look like you're posting on the days that you played, or you haven't posted in a while, or your handicap has fluctuated a lot, that they can make that determination. And if all your information is not accurate, it's going to be tough to argue against that. A couple other questions here. Will the Golf Genius app still automatically post our scores? Yes. If you play in a golf tournament at Congressional and it's a stroke play event and you turn in your scorecard at the end of the day, we will post your score for you. Golf Genius allows you to post to GolfNet and GIN. So it's a great, sometimes people will really used to just posting their own scores, and they'll post after the event, and it's possible that ends up getting double posted because we posted for you and then you posted for yourself. So if you play in a tournament at the club and it's a stroke play event, or you've played, let's say it's a match play event, and you turn in your scorecard and you got 18 scores down, we're going to post that for you. Another great question. When you play the inside 9 on the gold, do you select the front 9 or the back 9? Neither, actually. We have the inner 9 and the outer 9 rated as courses, and those should be available in the when you go on and post. So if you were to play either one, the slope and rating for both of those courses is on there. What if you play the blended tees? We do have a few different setups for hybrid tees. So that if you aren't familiar with what the blended tees are, we have a combination of, for the men, gold and white tees. For the ladies, should have silver and gold. If we don't have that rated, or you don't see that available when you go to post a score, please let me know. And that's an easy thing for us to add to the system. We're just working in conjunction with Maryland State. So if there's a specific blend that you like to play that you don't necessarily see on there, we can give you the slope and rating for those sets of tees to be able to post. Awesome. There we go. The playing conditions calculation explanation. Okay. This is new as of last year, a new concept for the World Handicap System. When adverse weather conditions or abnormal course setup causes scores to be unusually high or low on a given day, a playing conditions calculation will adjust score differentials to better reflect the player's actual performance. What the heck does that mean? Basically, if there are a collection of scores posted at a particular golf course on a particular day that show a trend that's higher or lower than what normally all of those players would have posted given their handicap, it gets flagged in the system and it actually gets adjusted not the actual score, but what we call the differential, which would be the score, how the system calculates your the score versus your handicap. Sorry, that it's hard to explain if I'm not in front of you, but the way that your performance is determined by the differential, which is your score based on versus the slope or rating of the tees that you played. And if your score is really high and most of your differentials are in a different range, the system will flat, and there's at least eight other people that have played that experienced a similar high differential, the system will automatically adjust those differentials to bring them down a little bit to make it more accurate. This is a very new concept. It's something I'm still trying to wrap my head around. And it happens automatically. It's just based on each individual golf course. So I remember giving this last year, this webinar, and we were talking about this concept, and we weren't really sure if it was based on region or how it was determined, but it's just based on your individual golf course, and it's calculated as long as there are 8 or more scores posted at a course on that particular day. The system looks at it, the algorithm looks at it for large differentials that are outside of the norm of those players, and it will create or adjust it if it's out of whack. I tried to look and see if there were any examples that happened this past year. I couldn't find any, so it's pretty rare. Someone just asked me, did you ever notice any applied last season? I think it's pretty rare. I need to talk. The Maryland State Handicap staff member is brand new. He just started in the last month or so. So I'd love to pick their brain on whether that's something they've seen a lot of over the past year, but it does not happen very often. It almost, I think most likely scenarios where it does happen is, say it's a stroke play event and it's played in just torrential rain or torrential wind. Like most conditions where the weather is going to affect scores a lot are not days where a lot of people are going to want to go out and play golf willingly. They probably have to play because there's an event. Another person just asked me how many times did it come into play. I don't think it came in to play at all last year. So again, a rare event. Got another question that relates back to the max score. If your handicap is 36, the max score on a hole would be par plus 4 strokes. Is that correct? So a 36 handicap, if we break it down by hole, is going to receive over 18 holes, 2 strokes per hole. So on a par 4, so you take whatever the par is, you're going to add your double bogey, so that's 2 strokes, and then you're going to add your 2 handicap strokes, so that's 2 more. So it would be par plus 4 on any hole. All right. Okay, using the GIN app. Emails, I just spoke, James is the gentleman that runs handicaps for Maryland State. I just spoke to him this afternoon because we didn't have our admin login yet. So I wanted to find out when that was happening. He told me that clubs are receiving their admin credentials or the email to set up your admin credentials tomorrow morning. And then emails are going out to all golfers, everyone with an MSGA handicap profile, tomorrow afternoon. So you're going to get an email. It's going to have a link to go set up what's called your digital profile, and it's going to provide you access to GIN.com and the GIN app. And access to the MSGA Golf Life app, which we've all been using, will end on February 1st. Your current handicap data has been transferred over already, and if you see anything on there that looks like it's missing, please let me know. We can investigate it, but it should all be there. If there's some older scores past 2019, they may not have transferred over, but your 20 most recent scores will definitely be in there. And if you see something missing, please let me know. Feel free to go on it and review that. The posting season in Maryland begins on March 15th. So rounds played during this time in the state of Maryland are not postable rounds. However, if you're playing golf elsewhere, there's some areas that are in season, you should still post those rounds. So even though you keep your handicap in Maryland, if you play around in an active posting season area, some examples here are Florida, Virginia is a year-round posting golf association. The Carolinas, just some popular places that people play golf this time of year. Just got another question about the playing conditions calculation. I think the PCC is based on scores posted that day. It will not affect those posted after that day. Is that correct? So what that question is asking is, if I forget to post my score and I post it the next day, and that day that I played ended up having a PCC adjustment, am I going to be affected? And the answer is no, because that is only calculated based on scores that are posted that day. So that speaks to the importance of posting day of, one, for the accuracy of all those calculations, but two, to make sure if there is some sort of adjustment for that day, that your score is going to be part of that and reflected accordingly. I got a little pop-up thing, but I hear a lot of different pronunciations of the GHIN. Some people call it GIN, some people just spell it out. And it's important as Congressional becomes a GIN club that everyone knows how to pronounce it correctly. So the Congressional members, it is GIN. I have a little visual aid here that should pop up. This is a nice reminder here. This is how it's pronounced, just like the liquor. So it is the GIN system. The H is, I don't know if it's silent is correct, or it's just, it blends in with the G. It is the GIN system. Again, I don't have credentials yet. I will tomorrow, so I wasn't able to go on and really mess around with the app, but these are just some screenshots so you can see what it looks like. Based on the feedback that I've heard, that we've already heard from one of the members that's on here that uses it, says it's a great app. I think it's going to be a really positive change. The Golf Net system was pretty antiquated. There was very few golf associations that still used it. Or GIN, I think it's the stat I read on the email from Maryland State is that 2.3 million golfers utilize the GIN system. So it's a very robust database, and I'm really excited that we're moving in that direction. Just want to make sure I didn't skip anything. Yeah. Okay, I just put a couple just frequently asked questions that I pulled off the GIN website because I wasn't able to really utilize it at all. One question, I share an email address with another golfer. Can we log in with the same email address? The answer is no. So you need a unique email address for each profile. Really the only scenario I see this happening is parents and kids. Maybe the juniors didn't have an email address. So there's going to need to be a second email address provided. I made an error when posting a score. How do I correct it? As a golfer, you are not able to go in and edit your scores. So you just have to let us know in the golf shop, and that's a quick, easy fix for us to be able to, let's say you posted it from, you made a mistake on the score, you made a mistake on the date, the tees, the course, whatever it is, all of those things are very easy for us to fix on the admin side. I know my GIN number, but I'm seeing unable to find golfer error message. This can be happening for a couple reasons. There's a dash in your GIN number. Don't include that when you type it in to the website, or you may have an inactive membership, and let us know. We can help troubleshoot that for you and make sure that your handicap profile is updated. The last question I put on here is, I'm getting an error message when trying to post a hole-by-hole score. Why? And the answer is that they don't have the par or the stroke index data available in their database. We should have that on there for all the tees from Congressional. But if you're trying to post hole by hole scores from a different club and you're getting that error message, that's why it's not allowing you to do that. It's because the actual breakdown of the holes based on par and what their index is not in the system. Got two questions here. If you play in a tournament that has some non-golf rules, such as you get 2 throws or a 2-foot rope to extend putts, do you ignore the round or guess what you have scored without the throw or the rope? Great question. We've all played in charity outings where I was just telling someone the other day, I played in one a few years back where they had basically an air gun, and you could pay $20 to put your ball in the gun and shoot it on the green on a par 4. And obviously that is not correct under the rules of golf. So it would depend. If you're playing a scramble, that's not under the rules of golf. If you just had a hole or two where you had one of these kind of gimmicky things that you were allowed to do, you should do net par on those. Count it as if you didn't play the hole, and then you can still, as long as the majority of the holes you played within the rules of golf, you can do net par for the holes that had those fun gimmick things that we see in a lot of these charity events. Second one, is there still a different tournament handicap under the new World Handicap system? There are no longer tournament scores. So that was something that prior to the new system going into effect, if you played in a tournament, you would mark that as a tournament score. And what that would do is it would keep that score in your system for a calendar year. So it wouldn't allow you to play 20 score. If it was a really good score, it wouldn't allow you to play 20 times over the next month and get it out of your repertoire. It would lock that in for you. That is no longer the case. That the tournament scores are no longer valid under the new system. I believe that is all my slides here. Yes, thank you very much for attending. I loved all the questions. I've got a couple on here that I need to circle back. The one about the slope and rating for the gold course, the rating for the stroke index for the blue when it opens. How do we determine that? And then the question about when a hole is configured differently than it is rated, like the first hole. And I will circle back on that. What I'll do is I'll just email out those answers tomorrow to the group, everyone that was on here. And hopefully, and if there's any other questions, please feel free to shoot me a note. And thank you so much, everybody, for hopping on. Really enjoyed doing these things, and I love seeing the interaction. And I'm excited everyone's excited about the upcoming season. So thank you so much to everybody, and I'll circle back on those questions tomorrow. Have a great night.